what do you guys think the next 2 months is going to look like when you have Game of Thrones coming back, going up in the same week as Rings of Power?
I think both can exist and be successful in today's age. I fully expect House of the Dragon to beat it out. And that's why right there. Because I think more people are putting eyes on HBO. HBO Max is the only streaming service last quarter that grew.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
And Amazon Prime, they do have shows, and I do think that their name brand recognition, I mean, obviously Prime's recognizable, but like Prime
Right.
Video, I do think it's starting to get a lot better because of The Boys. I think Prime Video is starting to get a little bit of some traction in the streaming wars. The one weird thing, and HBO has done a really nice job of this for not being technically a merchandising company, is like I thought, especially with the Wheel of Time show, that Prime would have a lot more like deals, like, hey, watch this episode and get this exclusive Funko Pop, you know what I mean, and get it shipped to your door. They did none of that. Like I know that they had products, but it wasn't as pushed as I thought. So I think that HBO being first to market's massive, and they're going to be out ahead. And here's the thing, if the first 2 episodes of House of the Dragon are absolute stunners, like 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10s,
right?
It doesn't matter if the Rings of Power debut's awesome.
Yeah. The other thing, and we were talking, and this is something we talked about during Wheel of Time, was we said one of the things we were worried about was that Wheel of Time released, and I think this is going to be the same for Rings of Power, is technically they're like, oh, it releases on Friday, but it actually released like Thursday or they released like Friday midnight globally, which is like, for me, it was like 4:00. And Ez was, I think it was like 7, right? 7 for you. Would have. So the only thing I see that if that's the same thing is Wheel of Time released, and like I think it was November was when it started.
Yeah.
And the problem I think Rings of Power has is that you're going to be releasing on a Thursday night during the opening of the NFL season, as opposed to like Wheel of Time coming out like, okay, like in the middle to like, second or like, whatever, second, third or whatever of the NFL season. Like that's one of the things I think House of the Dragon is going to struggle with towards the end as well, is that it's going to be releasing on Sundays during the NFL season, but thankfully it will already have had a handful of episodes out. But Lord of the Rings, you're going to be releasing on Thursday night, like right.
Yeah, I think with streaming
of the NFL season.
I think with streaming it matters a little bit less, but it still matters for sure. You see it across any other program, right? Like for instance, like pro wrestling always does very poorly during the NFL season or the NBA finals or whatever it might be. An interesting note is that House of the Dragon is actually going to end after Rings of Power as well, which I didn't know.
Oh, really?
So that's interesting.
So it's 2 episodes longer, or
yeah. And as someone who has their hand on the book community's pulse, I have to tell you guys, the general vibe for Rings of Power is not positive. And I don't agree with it. I actually thought the trailer looked good. I'm optimistic. I hope it does well. I really do.
Yeah.
The House of the Dragon trailers and the vibe, very positive, which I'm surprised by, if I'm being honest.
Right. Yeah. Can I say too, just real quickly, the in the Tolkien community, it is weird. Like those creators have now been trying to bring in content. They've actually been releasing images and tidbits through like TikTok content creators, people on Twitter, podcasters. Yeah. They're trying to really tap into the fan base or whatever, which does then show you that like HBO House, they don't have to do that. They don't have to wear. They're not. It's a different type of approach and style, because there was so much backlash for some reason at that Super Bowl trailer. Just in general, the handling of it or whatever. So it's odd. I still think though, as much as people like to bicker and kind of think like there's some negative energy, everybody's going to go line up and watch that bad boy. I mean, every single it's going to have numbers
Rings of Power.
Yeah. I don't care what people say. They're going to go see it just to go diss on it if they whatever they're thinking.
That's right.
So House of the Dragon, there is going to be competition. is I guess the thing. I'm just wondering how it will affect it. If you go back and you look at these past few months, one show is gonna get sort of buried, right? And now that everybody's got all these big shows that are coming up, like I don't know whose bright idea it was at Disney to release Miss Marvel, which actually on Rotten Tomatoes is the best reviewed MCU show ever.
My friends love it.
I watched the first episode. I really liked it. The second one, I was like, whatever. And then I ended up actually liking it. And to be honest, Miss Marvel is a character, and I'm a little more into comic books and stuff like that. I can't stand. I think she's annoying. She's just like it's like a kid. She's more of a teenager. I don't like Captain Marvel. It's like Jesus, whatever. But I actually really liked the show more than I liked the character from other media sources. But it didn't do well in terms of streaming numbers like initially because it was one going up against Kenobi on its own platform. Then it's a superhero show going up against The Boys and Umbrella Academy, and then Stranger Things. And it was like, who decided you should do this? But
yeah,
right now, House of the Dragon, at least it's starting early, but it's going to be going up against Andor, the Star Wars show, Lord of the Rings, another fantasy thing as well.
Property, yeah. I do think, and Edmonds mentioned this in chat, the trailer views, likes, in the comments, if you look at impressions wise, House of the Dragon is, I mean, it's actually kind of ridiculous how well it's doing. I think the trailer now, if you combine Twitter and YouTube, has like 17 million views within 24 hours, which is really great. And the trailer, the teaser did even better. I do believe both shows can exist. Because for instance, I mean, the Wheel of Time show, in my opinion, was a pretty debut, but it still did record numbers for Prime at the time. And just signed on for season 3. So I don't necessarily think it's like sink or swim, but you are right that there will be a clear winner at the end of it. There is a chance that both are just amazing and like maybe they battle it out at the
I kind of think that
Emmys. That would be dope, right?
Well, I think there's gonna be so much talk and chatter. And actually, my buddy Lane, shout out to him. He texted me the other day. He said he just kind of laughed because we run Up Talk and Token, our little podcast. He's like, it just dawned on him because I think he was watching something that Matt and I did, like a podcast came up on his feed. We're talking about the time in which House of Dragon is coming out, and so he was like, "Holy crap!" He's like, "Nerds are just going to be battling nerds." It's just going to be nerds, people coming out defending their fandoms and like, oh, like, no, it's better. It's like just a bunch of nerds going at it, and it's just like that's just going to create all this energy and all this hype. I mean, George actually even said in his not a blog post, he was like, somebody quoted him trying to say that he was dissing on the Rings of Power thing. He was like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "I'm like Tolkien inspired my work and stuff." He's like, "I want that. I'm going to be watching."
I think one of the advantages House of the Dragon will have over Lord of the Rings as well is while this is about characters that the mainstream audience isn't going to know, the look and feel of it being about the Targaryens and it's going to have dragons is going to feel much similar to what they remember than Rings of Power is. Because even if you just go from the Lord of the Rings trilogy to the Hobbit trilogy, while Gandalf and like the Ring and Sauron are all there, the key story of both the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings is the hobbits. It is like what makes the story what it is. It is Frodo. It is Frodo and Bilbo.
It's an unexpected journey.
When you pull that out, it's gonna feel a lot different to people.
Yeah,
and I think that could be something that is helpful to House of the Dragon because it's just going to be easier and it's not going to seem as like what is it going on here, as opposed to where Lord of the Rings. Not that Lord of the Rings still won't be successful, but I just think because of the fact that they're releasing like against each other.
Yeah, another thing is we have to think about age brackets and Game of Thrones when it released. A lot of people will have grown up in that being their first like real serious television show growing up. Like I think that there is like a generational thing here.
Yes.
And a lot of the Lord of the Rings fans are getting old, right? And it's kind of the get off my lawn moments. Like I remember the original trilogy, then they did The Hobbit. Like I think that might play a little bit into the excitement levels as well. And I think Rob in the chat had a really good point talking about how Game of Thrones has the bulk of fans that encountered the series through video. Whereas Lord of the Rings had existed for decades as a book and people knew the books. And I really, really like that. That's a good point.
Yeah. It actually is a really good point, though, that there's because that's what people, I mean, it's 2 points, right? So it's like you have this large book community where it's all about the books, Silmarillion, the whole thing, and then people became massive fans of the movies and the films. And then Matt's point was, well, this looks a lot different too. And that's also not necessarily based in the books. The people were hoping there would be, I mean, it is. Don't get me wrong. It's like there's the appendices and there's all that kind of stuff happening or whatever. But let me give you, can I give you one speculation that I think is going to happen in Rings of Power?
Please.
The meteor man that we see, the guy who shows up in the meteor, there's a meteor shooting down.
Tom Bombadil.
Well, people are talking about this Tom Bombadil.
I'd shit.
They think it's either him or a blue wizard, one of the two blue wizards showing up. And that the other comment, there'll be another one, maybe, possibly. But the little hobbit creature is the one reaching out, and it looks like a wizard reaching out, helping this little hobbit, like Harefoot, whatever they want to call him. But they're calling, people are saying Meteor Man is a blue wizard.
Holy
confirmed.
shit.
So,
That would be cool.
I would lose my mind about that. I like love the wizard. So like there, but is that bait? There is no text for that. So to Rob's point, to Matt's point, and stuff, it's like, yeah, Tolkien fans are like, wait a second, you're just making up stories. You can't do that. You know?
Can I say something really quick here?
Yeah.
You explaining why this is just for the people who don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Because I have not read any of the appendices or whatever.
Yeah.
I've literally only read The Hobbit.
Right.
But I've seen the Lord of the Rings movies a million times, and they're freaking fantastic.
Oh yeah.
You explaining why a blue wizard right there is going to be cool. I have no idea why a blue wizard is
cool.
Important. Is cool. So
how dare you?
How dare you?
Well, exactly. But I guess like I don't know. So the one thing I feel about House of the Dragon is that like what made Game of Thrones, even I would say comparing it, even if you just compare Game of Thrones to A Song of Ice and Fire, is A Song of Ice and Fire, the books, there is much more magic and mysticism, and winter is coming, and the White Walker is going to be a way more important deal. But what made Game of Thrones work so well was the human element of political drama, which we're going to have here. And I think that's going to be the thing that's just, it's so much easier for people to connect to.
Well, and to be fair, you know, I mentioned the Blue Wizard because I think it's cool because I'm
well, I know. I'm not trying to diss it. I'm just like,
I know. But I just wanted to say though, what the tie you're talking about, like the similarity between Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon being that political sort of backdrop or whatever, what they're going to do, what they're trying to do, because it is cool to analyze it, is Elrond,
like
Galadriel, you know,
were any of them alive? Are they alive during that?
Yeah, apparently they are. See, this thing is there's just like second age gap where literally it's like a list of bullet points. It's like a list of kings. There's nothing really to adapt. That's the problem Tolkien fans are having. They're like, what are you adapting? You know, and it's just like this crazy thing. So it's
not
Gandalf isn't alive during this time, right?
He is alive, but he's probably not. He's probably in Valinor, and he's probably not been sent to Middle Earth at this time. Like they think the theory is that the blue wizards came first. Maybe I love that we're restricted it.
No, it's great. It's great. Yeah.
But it's like it's important. I think it is because it is a cool. Okay, another example would be like Matt and I talk about Star Wars sometimes. They did this whole series called The High Republic, and Matt and I are like, all right, how do you get people invested in that? Where they're like, Yoda's still alive. You know what I mean? They do that thing where they're like, this guy is still over there. Still alive. Right. So now we're all in, and that's what you're saying. The Targaryens. I mean, that's the easy pull for House of the Dragon is Westeros. It's King's Landing, and it is actually the Targaryens. You know, so it's an easier sell. I think sometimes it's
right.
Well, and you know, George even said this in his Not a Blog. He said, guys, I don't think I'm going up against Tolkien. Like he's like, I am a competitive person, so of course I want to do well. He's like, but both of these shows can exist. Because I mean, I'll be honest, even hearing you talk about it, as like, I'm kind of fired up. Like, that sounds kind of cool.
I know it like now, some wizard lore.
Now, it could be a great fantasy show. Doesn't mean it's going to be a great Tolkien show,
right?
Whatever that might be. But I think Matt has it down pat here. I mean, it's about the Targaryen dynasty, which we know the levity of that.
Right.
And we know that, you know, where it ends up too, which to some people is a bad thing. But I just think that Westeros itself is so messy and dirty, and people just love that. They love a good drama, especially a family drama.
Right.
Yep.
And the only thing, in fact, I don't think the competition is necessarily Rings of Power. I think the competition is Succession on its own network, because Succession has filled the gap of dialogue-heavy family drama that Game of Thrones left over, and it cleaned up at the Emmys for nominations. And if you haven't seen it,
I watched it.
It is a tier 1 show. I mean,
really,
yeah.
Well, insanely good.
Well, that's been HBO's thing, is the HBO always has that next big show, and they thought it was going to be Westworld.
Yes, and it was for season 1. Season 1 was huge and great. And then it sucked.
Yeah. But and somebody left a great comment here too, and actually I want to nail it back here to Star Wars a little bit. Actually, they said the showrunner said the Targaryens are the Jedi at Westeros, and they are. And I think that's one of the things. One of the other things is that we're in the same place. Like, we're like, isn't that the courtyard where we said in our last stream before it got shut down? Isn't that the courtyard that was painted that Cersei's like, because it could be not the one in King's Landing, but it's the Iron Throne. Like, yes, the Targaryens have it done up differently, which is a little more book accurate. But it's like, we know what the Iron Throne is. We know what Dragonstone looks like. We know what this looks like. And that's one of the things. It's kind of like Star Wars, where they're like, why do they always go back to Tatooine? Well, because it's like home base.
I mean, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Like, even in the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit movies, when we went to the Shire, it was like, oh man, we're back. Like,
we're back. And that is, I admit, like, that is the tough part to sell on that show, is like, there are no hobbits, there's no Shire necessarily. Like, it's gonna be a weird...
Jurassic World did this so well. And I think it's actually the second best Jurassic Park movie. But in Jurassic World, when they go to Jurassic Park, and it's like playing the soft music a little bit, and it's like, dude, we're back. Like, they did it in such a way. But this is like, we're living inside the world. It's not even just like a thing. So it's just that immediate connection. Like, it makes it so much easier. It's why another reason I think they're just gonna keep with the Game of Thrones theme. Now, it could be like different instruments and stuff like that, but I think it's gonna be the same thing.
Yeah, or like Jimmy was saying, like, this feels older. Like, they could make a song feel older, and like just with some stuff. But yeah, I mean, because we're like breaking down what it is that brings us back. We're talking about Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. We're talking about like all these things. It's like so cool to think about what's taking us back and getting those feels.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Westeros, books, show, the whole thing, is that it's very cathartic, and that is such an odd feeling to describe to someone. And I struggle sometimes whenever people ask me like why it's still my favorite. I've read hundreds of books, and it's still my favorite books of all time. I've written books that are, in my opinion, technically better, but like they're my favorites, right? And it's just so cathartic to see the Iron Throne and to see Rhaenyra and knowing like what's going to happen. It's just like, I don't know. There's something about it, and it's really hard to put my finger on. And it's such an odd emotion to go through. But I feel like the shows that I've always loved the most happen to be those. And I think that one of the things that can really set this apart from Rings of Power is that Rings of Power is coming from a lineage of obviously books, but a movie trilogy. We don't know what this looks like as a television show. Does that world even work as a television show? And we're talking from a strictly technical show running standpoint. HBO's already done it. HBO's already had this. They have all the props. They have all these things. We know they can run a competent TV show for at least a few seasons. So to me, it's just like, I think there's less question marks around House of the Dragon.
Very true.
And this is big. That's another thing. Like, we'll have to see what happens when the show comes out. Like, I don't think it's going to be bunk, but like, if it is, I think this would kill Westeros. Like, I think this would be the end. And I think Miguel and Ryan probably know that.
I don't think so.
I don't mean that it's dead. They won't make more stuff, but a lot of people will be done.
Oh, it would turn people off. I still don't know about that though, because let's say it flops hard. I think, a few years later you could redo something, because like just other franchises that have gone through stuff. So like, and I haven't really seen a lot of it. I just study like, history and all this stuff. Like Star Trek, for example. You have the original Star Trek. It was great, big deal. They did all those movies. Then they came out with Next Generation, which is like the king of Star Trek. Then it was like, okay, we're going to stretch it out. We're going to do like Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise. And they didn't do so well. And then like a handful of years go by and J.J. Abrams comes in and redoes the movies, and they're freaking amazing movies. And Star Trek's back, and it's got, TV series and everything now. So
there's certainly a path to redemption.
Right.
And for how much they paid for all of the rights from George and the contract he signed, I'm
I
sure they
think
would
Lord
try
of the
again.
Rings is much more in danger than Game of Thrones.
Yes, but I would say the only reason why it's more in danger is because The Hobbit was a flop, right? So, like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
The Hobbit movies were okay. Yeah, but they weren't. They definitely
people are way too hard on those movies, in my opinion.
Right.
There's problems, but like, guys, name 5 other amazing fantasy movies.
Well, I would say that actually you're in the same boat, because it's like Game of Thrones is the most award-winning television show in history, and
That's right.
And Return of the King has like 13 Academy Awards. It's tied for it's like Return of the King, Titanic, and like Ben-Hur are like all have like 13 Academy Awards. Like nothing else is even close.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, the real thing though is none of us sitting here think that it's gonna flop. I mean, I would be shocked.
No.
I guess.
No.
It's just it's a hypothetical because it's like it looks so good, it feels so good.
Right.
As Jimmy was talking, like the feels that you get, you can't really put your finger on it, but there's something about it that is bringing you. It's just got us already captured, and we've been hearing from Twitter, social media, in the chat, just looking around social media. On the trailer itself, like you look at the comments and likes, and it's like people are locked back in. And as we said, it's not feeling the same for the other.